The dining room glowed in the amber light of early evening, the chandelier scattering soft reflections across polished silver and crystal. The scent of roasted rosemary chicken and freshly baked bread hung in the air, mingling with the low murmur of conversation. Friends from Mom's book club laughed in the corner, sipping champagne. A wall I'd spent hours curating stood behind her chair, 70 years of memories. From her childhood in Maine to the day she opened the town's first community library. I'd been up since dawn, making sure everything was perfect. Mom's favorite cake, 3 layers of lemon chiffon, sat on the sideboard under a glass dome. Her old college roommate had flown in from Boston. Even the table settings were deliberate Granddad's silver, polished until my arms ached, laid out beside the china Dad had saved for special occasions. This was more than a party. It was a promise that, despite everything, we still had a home. Martin rose from his seat, crystal flute in hand, his charcoal suit pressed to perfection. "To our wonderful mother," he began, flashing that boardroom smile that made strangers think he was charming. His voice was warm, rehearsed, calculated. 70 years young, still the heart of this family. Guests murmured in agreement, glasses lifting. Then his tone shifted. "And because we care about you, Mom, we've decided it's time for a change." He turned slightly, eyes locking on mine. "Pack your bags. Loser. This house is mine for a heartbeat." Silence gripped the room. Then came awkward chuckles, the kind people make when they're not sure if something is a joke. But Vivian's hand tightened around Mom's arm, her crimson nails resting there like a claim. Her smile wasn't amused, it was satisfied, as if the transfer of ownership had already taken place. I caught the flicker in Mom's eyes, confusion, hurt, the shadow of panic. She looked from Martin to me, searching for an explanation. None of the guests met my gaze. Champagne glasses clinked as if someone could toast the tension away. I slid my chair back slowly, every muscle tight, and walked to the hallway. The cool air from the front door met me as I stepped outside, phone already in hand. If they thought I'd be blindsided, they were wrong. Before everything narrowed down to doctor's appointments, grocery runs, and late-night checks to make sure the stove was off. I had a life in D.C. I was on the executive track at a boutique marketing firm, juggling high-profile accounts and negotiating contracts over rooftop lunches. My apartment overlooked the Potomac, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the sunrise. I was dating Alex, a software architect who loved weekend road trips and talked about moving in together. Then came the call. 5 years ago, on a damp March morning. Martin's voice came through the phone, clipped and impatient. "Mom's had a stroke." "She's stable, but someone needs to be there." He was too busy closing a major acquisition, and our younger sister, Lila, was living in Madrid with no plans to return soon. I told myself it would be a temporary pause. I packed 2 suitcases, left Alex with a key, and drove 3 hours south to the house I'd grown up in. Mom was still herself sharp, stubborn, but the left side of her body lagged behind her mind. She needed help with meals, therapy appointments, small tasks that kept her dignity intact. Weeks turned into months. I started taking calls from the firm at odd hours, working from the dining room table between caregiving duties. The commute for in-person meetings became a strain, eventually. My boss stopped asking when I'd be back full-time. Alex lasted a year before telling me he couldn't do the long-distance thing anymore. The house became my world. My father had built the screened porch by hand the summer before he died, sanding each board until it felt like silk under bare feet. The oak banister on the stairs still bore the faint dent from the time I'd tumbled down at age 7. Every creak in the floorboards, every chip in the kitchen tiles, was part of our family's story. I told myself I was staying for Mom. That walking away from my career, my relationship, my independence was a choice made out of love. But as the years passed, I began to wonder if love was the whole story, or if Martin and Lila had known all along that I wouldn't leave her side. And now, watching Martin stake his claim, I could feel that suspicion hardening into certainty. It was the Christmas after Mom's stroke when Martin first brought Vivian through the front door. He introduced her as a nurse friend who's been helping Mom out when I'm around, saying it with the easy confidence of someone who expected applause for his thoughtfulness. Vivian was all warmth and polished charm. Honey blonde hair swept into a perfect twist, a velvet dress that caught the firelight. She carried a tin of homemade truffles and kissed Mom's cheek like they'd known each other for years. Within weeks, she was woven into the fabric of our daily life. She offered to drive Mom to appointments to give me a break and started arriving with pre-prepared gourmet meals that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. Mom, ever gracious, was delighted by the attention, and I told myself that accepting help wasn't a weakness. But Vivian's presence wasn't just about care, it was about access. She asked about the square footage of the house during coffee one afternoon, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. Another time, she lingered by the family photos, remarking on how old properties like this must be worth a fortune now. I laughed it off. But the comment stayed lodged in my mind. Her compliments often came wrapped in something sharper. "It's admirable you've taken a career break," she told me once while slicing pears for a salad. Not many people could step away like that without worrying about falling behind. She smiled as if it were a kindness, but the implication stung. Martin never seemed to notice or pretended not to. In public, he praised Vivian endlessly, how she'd been a godsend, how she was lightening the load for everyone. Yet when she spoke to me, her gaze often landed somewhere over my shoulder, as though direct contact was unnecessary. I began to watch her more closely, noting what she noticed, and what she noticed always seemed to come back to this house. It was a Tuesday evening when I came home from the pharmacy and heard low voices coming from the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, the grocery bag heavy in my arms. Martin's tone was clipped. "All business." Vivian's voice was softer but carried a note of satisfaction. I caught fragments transfer, valuation. Signatures before the sound of a drawer sliding shut cut the conversation off. When I stepped into the kitchen, they were standing apart, Martin flipping through his phone while Vivian rearranged the fruit bowl. Neither looked at me. Martin said something about checking Mom's insurance forms, and Vivian smiled too quickly, asking if I'd picked up the right tea for Mom. The moment passed, but the words I'd overheard stayed lodged like a splinter. A few days later, our neighbor Mrs. Carter stopped me at the mailbox. "I met some friends of Vivian's the other afternoon," she said, adjusting the strap of her gardening tote. "Nice people, though I was surprised to see them taking measurements of your porch. Said they were thinking of doing something similar at their place." Her tone was casual, but her brow furrowed slightly, as if she didn't quite believe the explanation herself. Meanwhile, Mom was having more moments of confusion. She would lose her train of thought mid-sentence or forget where she'd left her reading glasses, only to find them in the freezer. Vivian brushed it off with a sympathetic tilt of her head. "It's just aging." She told me, "You can't expect her to be as sharp as she used to be." But the changes felt sudden, and they didn't sit right with me. Mom had always been meticulous about details, even after her stroke. Now, whole afternoons seemed to slip from her memory. That weekend, I drove over to see my Uncle Clive. The walls of his study still smelled faintly of the law books he'd packed away after retirement. He listened without interrupting, fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he leaned forward. "If they're meeting with a real estate agent," he said, his voice low and certain, "time is shorter than you think. These things move fast once the paperwork's in motion." The certainty in his eyes told me I couldn't afford to wait for proof to fall into my lap. Clive's warning stayed with me like an echo I couldn't silence. If they were moving pieces behind the scenes, I couldn't afford to wait for the perfect moment. I had to make my own. The first step was observation. I bought 2 discreet cameras, small enough to disappear against the crown molding in the living room and kitchen. I placed them where they would catch both casual interactions and anything unusual papers on the table, conversations in low voices. The memory cards became my private archive, footage I reviewed late at night with the volume low and the blinds drawn. Next, I began tracking Mom's medication. I kept her prescriptions in a locked box in my room, doling them out exactly as prescribed and noting every dose in a spiral-bound notebook. I also kept a separate log when Vivian helped with tea, when Martin stopped by unexpectedly. Any change in Mom's alertness. Patterns started to emerge, subtle but undeniable. With the evidence building in motion, I reached out to Rowan Hale, an old friend from my short-lived attempt at law school who had gone on to specialize in elder law. We met in a quiet corner booth at a coffee shop 2 towns over. I told her everything: Martin's announcement, Vivian's comments, the neighbors' observations, Clive's advice. Rowan didn't interrupt, just took notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she slid the pad aside and said, "We're going to put safeguards in place now, before they make a move." Over the next hour, she drafted a limited power of attorney naming both Clive and me as co-agents, requiring both our signatures for any major decisions. She prepared a healthcare proxy granting us authority over Mom's medical choices if she couldn't speak for herself, and she wrote a signed declaration of Mom's wish to remain in her home with in-home care as needed. We chose the following Wednesday to finalize everything. Vivian had a luncheon with friends, giving us a clear window. That morning, I kept things light with Mom over breakfast, talking about the garden and a recipe she wanted to try. When Vivian left, Rowan arrived with a mobile notary. Clive joined us, his presence steadying both Mom and me. The signing took less than 20 minutes. Mom's signature was firm, her voice clear as she confirmed she understood each document. The notary stamped and sealed them, and Rowan collected the originals for safekeeping in her office. As I walked them out to the car, a weight lifted from my chest, but only slightly. I'd built a shield, yes, but shields only matter if you're ready for the strike. The week before Mom's birthday, the house became my project in full. I spent evenings perfecting her favorite dishes: rosemary chicken, buttered peas, and a lemon chiffon cake that took 3 tries to get just right. The photo wall grew into a timeline of her life, each image paired with handwritten captions in ink that matched the script from old letters I'd found in the attic. The centerpiece of the evening would be my gift: a voucher for a week on the Maine coast, the same rocky shoreline where she and Dad had honeymooned 50 years ago. While I was arranging the table settings, Vivian appeared in the doorway, a too bright smile on her face. "I hope you don't mind," she said, "but I've invited a dear friend of mine. Graham. He simply adores your mother." Something about her tone prickled. When I asked what Graham did, she hesitated before saying, "Oh, he's in property. Knows the market like no one else." I filed the information away without comment. Martin called that night, confirming his attendance with a breezy, "Vivian says this is going to be a party to remember." His voice carried an undercurrent of something: anticipation, maybe even triumph that I couldn't quite place. In the hours before the celebration, the energy in the house felt off-kilter. Vivian moved through the rooms with a kind of rehearsed excitement, adjusting napkin folds that didn't need adjusting, checking her phone between exaggerated compliments to Mom. Martin arrived early, carrying a bottle of champagne and the air of someone walking into a boardroom with the winning bid already in hand. I kept my focus on the details: flowers in the vases, candles set to light just before guests arrived, the trip voucher tucked in an envelope beneath Mom's dessert plate. On the surface, it was shaping up to be the perfect evening, but in the quiet moments between tasks, I caught them exchanging glances, their smiles too controlled, their whispers cut short when I walked into the room. Something was coming. I just didn't know if the celebration I'd planned was for my mother's life or the end of it as she knew it. Dinner had gone exactly as I'd planned, at least until Martin stood, glass in hand, and tapped his spoon against the rim. The chatter around the table quieted, and he smiled down at Mom, his tone smooth and warm. "To our remarkable mother," he began, "who's given us love, stability, and a home we'll always cherish." He paused, letting the words settle like a benediction. Then his smile sharpened. "Which is why it's time we made sure she has the care she truly deserves. As of this month, I've been granted power of attorney. Mom will be moving into Rosewood Senior Living, and this house, well, it's going on the market. For a heartbeat." No one moved. Then Graham, seated near the end of the table, unzipped his leather portfolio and laid out glossy brochures, wide shots of sunlit rooms and open-plan kitchens. "The market's strong right now," he said, flipping one toward Martin. Mom's fork clinked against her plate. "But what about the Maine trip?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, her eyes searching mine. Martin didn't miss a beat. "That's not practical anymore. Mom, Rosewood has lovely gardens and ocean views. You'll be comfortable there." The air in my chest turned cold and tight. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, could feel every muscle lock into place. They hadn't just planned this, they'd planned it for tonight, in front of witnesses, using her birthday as a shield. I set down my napkin, stood, and pushed my chair in slowly. "Excuse me for a moment," I said, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. In the hallway, away from the murmur of voices, I pulled out my phone and dialed Rowan. She picked up on the second ring. "It's happening now," I said. "Everything we prepared for. I need you here immediately." They arrived exactly when they said they would. Rowan first, brisk and composed. Clive just behind her with his steadying presence, and Dr. Shepard carrying his small leather bag. We stepped into the dining room together, the hum of conversation dying instantly. Martin was mid-sentence, describing Rosewood's amenities as if it were a resort. Vivian's hand rested on Mom's shoulder, her smile tight. "This stops now," I said, moving to stand beside Mom. "She's not moving anywhere, and this house is not for sale." Martin's expression shifted from surprise to a mocking calm. "Ilara, this isn't your decision." "It's not yours either," I countered, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Unless you think drugging our mother to make her more compliant counts as caregiving." Gasps rippled through the guests. Vivian's hand dropped away. I tapped the screen and brought up screenshots texts from 3 years ago. Martin found the perfect Mark widow, valuable property. Vivian daughter can be handled. Get me an introduction. Dr. Shepard stepped forward. "I've examined Mrs. Whitford recently and have serious concerns about unprescribed sedatives in her system. I'm here to draw a sample today." Graham, still seated, closed his folder of brochures. "I was told this was a consensual sale. If there's any dispute." "I'm out." He slid the folder into his bag, avoiding everyone's eyes. Vivian's voice wavered. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said, cutting her off. "It's over. We have the documents, the witnesses, and the truth. You can't hide what you've done." Martin's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. The room felt suspended, waiting for the next move, and I knew it was time to press every advantage we had. Vivian's composure cracked first, her lips twisted into something sharp, and she let out a short, bitter laugh. "Fine. I never cared about your mother. This was about the payout, the house, the money, all of it. Martin promised me half when we sold." Martin's head snapped toward her. That's not how this was supposed to sound. Rowan stepped forward, her voice calm but cutting. "You mean it's not how you wanted it heard? We've traced over $80,000 in transfers from your mother's accounts to your own company, Martin, all under the guise of management fees." He opened his mouth to object, but Mom's voice stopped him. Stronger than I'd heard it in months. She said, "Vivian, get out of my house." The room went silent. Clive didn't miss a beat. "Your prenuptial agreement bars you from any claim to this property." Given the evidence of fraud, we can have you legally removed before the week is out and pursue annulment." Vivian's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally. None came. She grabbed her bag and stalked toward the door, muttering under her breath. Martin stood rigid, jaw working. "You think this is over? I'll take it to court." Rowan lifted a folder from her briefcase. "Emergency protective orders are already filed. No property transfers, no withdrawals, no sales. Effective immediately." His face flushed, and without another word, he shoved back his chair and left, the slam of the front door vibrating through the walls. I exhaled slowly, my hand still resting on Mom's shoulder. The immediate threat was gone, but the damage they'd tried to do lingered like a shadow across the room. 3 months later, the house felt lighter, as if it had been holding its breath until Vivian was gone. Mom's confusion had faded, replaced by the clarity I remembered from before all of this began. She moved through her days with more energy, tending to her plants, reading by the window, even baking again. Vivian had vanished from our lives entirely, and Martin kept his distance, his name now attached to an ongoing investigation. The silence from him was its own kind of answer. Lauren began visiting every other weekend, sometimes bringing her kids, sometimes just sitting with Mom over tea. Our conversations were easy again, unweighted by suspicion. I often thought about the fight we'd been forced into, how close we'd come to losing more than just a house. This place was more than timber and nails. It was the keeper of our family's history, the quiet witness to our lives. That evening, Mom and I sat together on the porch swing, the air warm with the scent of lilacs. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and rose, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the calm of knowing we'd kept what mattered,